back to On the Flip Side. I'm your host, Adam Shawwalker. Today we're going to be covering Blood Incantation's Hidden History of the Human Race. Denver, Colorado-based cosmic death metal. Blood Incantation, been around for the past few years. They've been on this sci-fi cosmic death metal thing since they started with Interdimensional Extinction as well as Starspawn. Now on their second full-length record, they are doing the same thing again. This formula is apparently tried and true at this point because these guys have gotten so large over the past few years. They went from essentially just being a very niche local band to just absolutely getting worldwide acclaim. They had a European tour booked over this past year and it had to get canceled due to COVID, but the year before they were opening for bands like Cannibal Corpse. So these guys are doing quite well for themselves, and we're going to be checking out last year's release, Hidden History of the Human Race. Track listing on this one is only 4 songs. We've got Slave Species of the Gods, The Giza Power Plant, Inner Paths to Outer Space, and Awakening from the Dream of Existence to the Multidimensional Nature of Our Reality, parentheses, Mirror of the Soul. The first 3 tracks of the album are on the first side of the record. On the second side is just the final track, which is around 18 or so minutes long, but we will still cover these just side to side, and we will come back after we see you on the flip side. Alright, we're back with side 1 of Blood Incantation's Hidden History of the Human Race. First track off the album is Slave Species of the Gods. This track really immediately kicks off with bellowing guttural vocals and aggressive guitars. If you're a big fan of classic death metal, you can immediately hear the demi-lich influences on this track. In modern death metal, there tends to be kind of 2 routes that people will go for when they're deciding which musical direction their band is going to go, and it's either Cannibal Corpse death metal or it's just death metal, and you don't really see people doing demi-lich worship, which I think is one of the reasons that Blood Incantation is kind of blown up a bit. It's just a different enough direction that I think it's just really working for the time. And you can see this demi-lich worship all over this record as well as pretty much all of their back catalog too. The sonic assault on this track really never lets up for more than a moment, and it consistently ups the tempo for the most part. The second track off of the record is the Giza Power Plant. Pretty par for the course, instant guttural vocals right off the bat, and guitar pinch harmonics that instantly remind you that you are in fact listening to a Blood Incantation record. Just about a minute into the song, there's a really excellent reverbed out guitar solo that's tastefully done. Once again, the lyrics focus more on Anunnaki conspiracy theories. Pretty much all of their music has dealt with some kind of Anunnaki or space conspiracy theory stuff since their first EP. The second half of this track mellows out a little bit for this really cool refrain that's accented by these sort of Egyptian style guitar scales that eventually lead into more slow guttural vocal delivery, slower than anything else that's been on the record so far, but it's really well done at this point to have these bellowing vocals underneath this slow tempo here. The presentation of everything on this track is really expertly handled at this point in the song, and especially towards the end of the song you get these breakdowns that are really tight and very aggressive. So that song leads out into the third track, Inner Paths to Outer Space. The shortest track on the record as well as the first single off of this album, which is to me kind of an odd choice, as this track is an interlude track to essentially the second half of the album, which is the final track on the record, on side 2. So this track essentially builds on these reverbed out guitars and these spacey sort of samples. If you watch the music video for this track, it all kind of meshes very well. It sort of builds up tempo and adds more guitar distortion in, and it just keeps building and building and building until you get to this guttural roar. The song it's a really badass track that just really builds, and it's really, really well done, especially to lead up to the second half of this record. We're just gonna go with Mirror of the Soul to save time and my mental energy. But anyway, that's the first half of the record. We will come back after side 2 and Mirror of the Soul and discuss that one and go over the whole record and go over final thoughts. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you on the flip side. Alright, we are back with side 2 of the record and the final track of the record, Mirror of the Soul. Like I said, I'm not gonna do the entire title. So you have more explosive guitar work and double bass tracks that just open up this entire track, and there's some really nice guitar reverb that introduces the vocal into this track as well. The first vocals on this track are really well accompanied by the drums as well as these ascending and descending scales for the guitar. This eventually fades back into this chugging, which leads into the first guitar solo, which is really excellent as well. The ferocity of this track compared to the rest of the record really can't be matched at this point. You get more of these like rhythmic riffs after this solo that are reminiscent of like Leprosy by Death, and these like riffs occupy a good portion of this segment of the song, which then are quickly replaced by like Dive Bomb, Floyd Rose solos, and just heavier drums and bass, and even more chaos in this track. And you get like just really over the top double kick, double bass drum delivery on this thing. The track ends up starting to slow down a bit to this sort of toned down guitar feedback soundscape thing that would honestly fit really well on like a Brian Eno ambient record. It kind of comes out of nowhere, but it works really well and it fits with the tone of the song. The tension that this builds across this entire segment, it just gets drawn out, and there's like these sprinkling of synths that reintroduce the guitar and then helps kick off one of the best solos on the track, as well as probably on this entire album. The drum work here seems to be kicked up a notch somehow, if that's even really possible, after this point in the song. And once again, you get these very early Death influenced riffs that just lead back into heavier and heavier segments of this track. It's like they wrote this track to just get heavier and heavier as it goes on, but this track is also like 14 minutes long. It's just slamming brutal death metal, and it does not let up for more than a few moments on this track other than the main interlude until it just builds and builds and builds, and then finally at the very end of the song you get this kind of cascading falling off the track into this like really calm acoustic bit, which I think really bookends the song quite well. It fades off into this kind of like spaceship kind of leaving Earth sort of sound. Overall, I think this record it's really quite good. I'm excited to see where Blood Incantation goes from here, because you have like lots of these really heavy, like the Starspawn album had a lot of really heavy moments on on that record. This album here has even more heavy moments that are kind of interdispersed with like prog death metal moments as well. So Blood Incantation are essentially building themselves more towards like these grandiose concept albums. So I'm just wondering where they're going to go from here, if they're going to like mellow out a little bit, or if they're going to get even heavier, or if the track listings are going to be longer with longer tracks in general. The last track on this album is really just indicative to me that they are going to be moving in more of a concept-based direction, but I could be wrong. As for the quality of the album itself, I've enjoyed pretty much every track in this record, and I mean, there's not many of them. There's only a 4-track album, but the songs that are on here are really solid tracks. This album, I think, was a bit overhyped prior to the release of it, and when it came out, people were kind of expecting a bigger thing. But I think what they've done here is extraordinarily admirable, and there's a lot of solid ideas on this record that I think are going to carry over into whatever Blood Incantation's next release is. So I am looking forward to whatever they put out in the future, and this album here, check it out. Other than that, thank you so much for watching. What should I review next? Oh, and Happy New Year's. Let me know what I should cover next year, and keep me aware of any releases that are going to be going on in the next few months, because I want to cover some newer stuff. Thank you all so much for watching. We'll see you on the flip side.